Sometimes the truth doesn't reveal itself in words, but in the silence between them. A woman can sense when something feels off, even when everything looks perfect on the surface. The laughter may sound the same, the smile may still appear, but the energy has shifted. It's in the details, the small cracks that start to show where reality whispers louder than excuses. When another presence exists in the shadows, it's never the obvious that gives it away. It's the subtle things, the hidden signs that speak the truth louder than any confession. When someone begins to pull away emotionally, it rarely happens overnight. At first, it feels like a small shift, something so subtle that it almost slips past unnoticed. The warmth that once lived in the way conversations flowed suddenly feels dimmed, like a fire losing its glow. The excitement in their voice when sharing stories fades into monotone replies, and where there used to be depth, now there's only surface level exchanges. This kind of emotional distance is not about being busy or stressed. It's about withholding a part of themselves, consciously or unconsciously, to create space for someone else. A woman can feel the difference because love is not just about words, it's about energy. Once his eyes lingered a second longer, his attention stayed fully present, and every moment felt wrapped in connection. But now his gaze drifts elsewhere, his responses are delayed, and his mind seems to be in another world even while sitting in the same room. That loss of presence is not random. It's the kind of absence that comes when emotional investment is being redirected. This detachment becomes clearer in the silences. Where there used to be effortless conversation, now there is hesitation. He no longer asks about the little details of your day, no longer engages with the stories that once made him laugh. Questions become fewer, and answers become shorter. The emotional closeness that built the relationship begins to feel one-sided, leaving you carrying the weight of conversations, wondering why the spark feels different. The reality is, when someone is trying to juggle two worlds, they begin to ration their emotions, giving less in one place to preserve more in another. It's also visible in the way affection changes. Touch becomes less frequent, hugs feel less genuine, and small gestures of intimacy fade. Even if he still performs them, they no longer hold the same authenticity. A kiss may still happen, but it feels like a formality rather than a spontaneous expression of desire. He may still say, "I love you," but the words feel hollow, stripped of the emotion they once carried. That's because emotional distance cannot be masked with routine. It always shows in the feeling behind the action. Another sign is avoidance of vulnerability. Where once he might have opened up about fears, struggles, or dreams, now those conversations shrink. He avoids sharing personal thoughts, dodges deeper discussions, and keeps everything light or trivial. Vulnerability requires trust and full emotional commitment, and when that is being shared elsewhere, the well runs dry at home. The distance becomes a wall, subtle but heavy, leaving you feeling like you are talking to a stranger you used to know. The hardest part is that this shift often makes you question yourself first. You wonder if you're imagining things, if you're simply being too sensitive, if perhaps he's just tired or stressed. But deep down, the intuition is rarely wrong. Emotional distance does not lie. It's the silent alarm that signals when someone's heart is no longer fully where it used to be, and no matter how much he tries to hide it, the emptiness between his words and his actions begins to reveal the truth louder than anything he could say. A change in routine often looks innocent on the surface, but it carries the weight of something much deeper when it happens without reason. Life naturally brings adjustments, work deadlines, family obligations, personal goals, but when those shifts begin to feel inconsistent, unexplained, or strangely secretive, it signals that something is being hidden. Patterns that once felt steady begin to fracture. The predictable rhythm of days and nights starts to lose its harmony, and instead of feeling secure, you begin to feel left in the dark. It usually starts small. Maybe he stays out a little later than usual, offering vague explanations that don't quite make sense. "I had to finish something at work," or "I grabbed a drink with a friend." might sound believable at first, but over time the stories repeat with less detail, less clarity, and less effort to reassure you. The once consistent text updates become sporadic. The phone calls that used to happen at certain times get skipped altogether. His schedule suddenly feels less transparent, as though he has started building a life that no longer fully includes you in its timeline. The routine shift also shows in how he prioritizes time. Where once there was effort to be together, suddenly excuses begin to outweigh presence. Plans are cancelled at the last minute, replaced with obligations that never used to exist. He may claim exhaustion or business, yet somehow always finds energy for something else you cannot quite trace. This inconsistency creates an unsettling gap, a void where connection used to live, and it quietly chips away at the sense of stability that once held everything together. Another layer is the secrecy that begins to surround these changes. He may become more vague about where he's going, offering minimal details, as though keeping things deliberately blurred. Questions that once invited natural conversation now seem to make him defensive, as though your curiosity is an intrusion. Instead of transparency, there's evasion. Instead of openness, there's a subtle attempt to close doors on parts of his life you used to have full access to. The more you notice it, the more the routine itself begins to feel like a mask designed to hide what's really going on. Even the way he spends time at home begins to alter. He might stay up later than usual, glued to his phone or computer, claiming he has something to finish. He might leave earlier than necessary for simple errands, stretching them out far longer than they should take. These little extensions, these unexplained gaps of time, become the shadows where secrets grow. And while each instance might seem harmless in isolation, together they weave a pattern that can no longer be dismissed. The truth is, routine is one of the clearest reflections of where a person's loyalty lies. When someone begins to live in two worlds, they can't maintain the same consistency they once had. The cracks will always appear. The clock doesn't lie. The calendar doesn't lie. And when the familiar rhythm of your shared life begins to feel disrupted without reason, it's rarely just coincidence. It's the echo of divided attention of a heart that's investing time elsewhere, even when the lips refuse to confess it. The phone becomes more than just a device when something is being hidden. It turns into a shield, a secret box, a silent witness to another life. What once lay casually on the table during dinner now never leaves his hand. It's no longer just about calls and messages. It's about guarding access, as though every vibration could expose a truth he's desperate to protect. The overprotectiveness with the phone is rarely subtle. It creeps in gradually, and it's in those small shifts that the story begins to unfold. At first, it might look like harmless habit. He starts flipping his phone face down, something he never used to do. He takes it with him when walking into another room, even for something as simple as grabbing a glass of water. The device that was once left charging by the bed now stays locked tightly in his pocket, never out of reach. These little changes don't scream guilt at first glance, but they whisper it in ways that are hard to ignore. Passwords become another layer of distance. Suddenly, the phone that once unlocked easily has new codes, new patterns, new security features. When asked, explanations are vague, just being safe, or everyone does it now. But safety is rarely the reason. It's not about protecting the phone from the world, it's about protecting it from you. The secrecy becomes a wall, shutting out the trust that once allowed everything to be open and shared. There's also the shift in how he reacts when the phone lights up. A simple notification can trigger a flicker of panic across his face. He reaches for it quicker than ever, turning the screen away before you can glance. Calls are answered in rushed tones, voices kept low, and sometimes they're not answered at all until he steps outside. The act of communication turns into a performance, carefully staged to hide who's really on the other side. Even silence around the phone becomes telling. He may suddenly mute notifications or keep the device on Do Not Disturb. At times he never did before. He might become overly cautious, checking it constantly, not because of necessity, but because of the fear of being caught. This hyper-awareness, this constant guarding, betrays the truth more than any text message ever could. The most revealing part isn't the device itself, but the shift in energy around it. When someone guards their phone with such intensity, it sends a clear message. It's no longer just a tool, it's a vault of secrets. And the more they try to keep it hidden, the more obvious it becomes that there is something inside worth hiding. Trust thrives in openness. When a phone becomes untouchable, when it transforms into a barrier instead of a bridge, it's a sign that transparency has been replaced with concealment. No matter how much he insists it's nothing, actions speak louder. And when those actions revolve around guarding a screen more closely than guarding the bond you share, the silence of the phone says everything his lips refuse to admit. Kindness, when it comes from the heart, feels natural, effortless, and steady. But when it begins to flow from guilt, it carries a different weight, one that feels almost too heavy, almost forced. A person hiding something often tries to balance their secrets with sudden generosity, as if gifts or gestures can silence the unease that grows inside them. This unusual sweetness may look flattering at first glance, but beneath it lies a tension that makes it difficult to ignore. It usually starts with sudden surprises. Maybe there are random flowers, unexpected gifts, or thoughtful gestures that weren't part of the usual rhythm. At first, it feels like romance has returned, like effort is being made again. And it can even make you question whether you've been misreading everything else. But consistency reveals the truth. Genuine affection builds slowly and naturally, while guilt-driven kindness comes in bursts, often after moments of secrecy, arguments, or unexplained absences. This type of kindness has a timing to it. After a night of being unreachable, there's suddenly a flood of attention the next day. After an unexplained change in plans, there's a gift to make it up to you. The pattern repeats. Distance followed by overcompensation. The gestures are not rooted in pure love, but in an attempt to cover cracks, to mask the shadows with light. It's less about giving from the heart and more about soothing their own conscience. There's also a difference in how the kindness feels. When it's real, you can feel the warmth in their eyes, the intention in their actions, the genuine connection in every word. But when it's guilt-driven, there's something rushed, almost transactional about it. The smile doesn't quite reach the eyes. The hug feels like a performance, and the gifts feel like bandages placed over wounds that were never supposed to exist. Another sign is the inconsistency. Genuine love thrives in the small, daily acts, checking in, listening, remembering little details. But guilt-driven kindness often shows up in grand gestures while neglecting the ordinary ones. He may buy you something expensive, yet ignore the fact that he no longer listens the way he used to. He may shower you with compliments, yet avoid the deeper conversations that once defined your bond. The imbalance between the big displays and the lack of true presence exposes the truth. The irony of guilt is that it cannot stay hidden forever. It leaks out even through kindness. And while these sudden bursts of affection may feel confusing, they eventually reveal themselves as what they are: attempts to cover guilt with sweetness. The heart knows the difference between love and compensation. One fills you with warmth that lasts, the other leaves you with questions that never fully quiet down. When kindness is born out of guilt, it doesn't strengthen the bond. It weakens it further, because it reminds you that something is being concealed. No matter how many gifts appear, no matter how many sweet words are spoken, the emptiness behind them cannot be hidden. Love that is genuine doesn't need to overcompensate. It simply is. And when it stops being that, no amount of sugar can mask the bitterness that truth has already left behind. Defensiveness has a way of exposing the very thing someone is trying to hide. When there is nothing to conceal, questions are met with openness, conversation flows with ease, and even uncomfortable topics can be handled with calmness. But when secrets exist, the smallest inquiry can feel like a threat, and the response is no longer about honesty, it's about protection. The tone changes, the body language shifts, and suddenly every simple question feels like walking on eggshells. It starts with irritation over the most ordinary things. A casual "where were you?" is no longer answered with a story, but with a sharp tone or a dismissive response. Instead of clarity, there's tension. Instead of reassurance, there's accusation. "Why are you asking me that?" Or "don't you trust me?" The question itself becomes the problem, not the behavior that triggered it. This flipping of blame is a classic tactic of someone who feels cornered by their own actions. The defensiveness also shows in how quickly small conversations escalate. What should be light and simple turns heavy, as though the air thickens with every word. Instead of addressing what's being asked, he may try to shift focus, turning the spotlight back onto you. Accusations surface. "You're too controlling," "you're overthinking," or "you're just insecure." These words are not reflections of reality, but shields designed to deflect attention from the truth. The louder the denial, the more obvious the guilt becomes. Another layer is the inconsistency in reactions. Sometimes the response is immediate anger, a heated defense as though your curiosity is an attack. Other times it's cold silence, withdrawing from the conversation altogether, leaving you feeling guilty for even asking. This inconsistency itself is telling. When someone has nothing to hide, their answers remain steady. When someone carries secrets, their reactions change depending on how close you are to uncovering them. Defensiveness can also creep into body language. Avoiding eye contact, crossing arms, fidgeting, or suddenly changing the subject all reveal a discomfort that words cannot cover. The body often betrays what the lips try to deny. Even in moments when the voice sounds calm, the unease in physical gestures tells another story. Over time, this defensiveness doesn't just protect the secret, it creates distance. You begin to feel silenced, hesitant to ask questions, afraid of the tension that follows. What was once an open bond now feels like a minefield where the wrong word could spark an explosion. That fear of asking is not natural in love. It's the result of being conditioned to accept half-truths in place of honesty. The irony is that this very defensiveness ends up revealing more than it hides. If there were nothing to protect, there would be no need for such intensity, no need for such walls. Defensiveness is not born out of innocence, it's born out of fear. The fear of being discovered, the fear of losing control of the narrative. And no matter how well it's disguised as frustration or offense, the truth always lingers beneath it, waiting to surface. Lies rarely collapse because of the big story, they unravel in the smallest details. When someone is hiding another woman, inconsistencies start slipping into their words, their timelines, and their explanations. At first, the contradictions may seem too minor to matter. A detail here, a forgotten sequence there. But over time, the little mismatches create a pattern that feels impossible to ignore. Truth has a rhythm, a consistency that flows naturally. Lies, on the other hand, require constant memory, constant adjustment, and eventually the cracks begin to show. It often begins with repeated stories that don't quite match. He may tell you he was working late, but when the subject comes up again, the details change. Suddenly it wasn't work, it was a friend who needed him. The excuses shift depending on the day, the mood, or the pressure of the conversation. And while each individual change might be brushed off as forgetfulness, the inconsistencies pile up like broken puzzle pieces that never fit together. The timeline is another place where lies reveal themselves. You ask a simple question like, "What time did you leave?" And the answer feels shaky, lacking confidence. Later, the same story carries a different time frame. What once sounded casual now sounds rehearsed, as though each version is a script being adjusted to keep the truth hidden. The more questions asked, the more tangled the story becomes, because lies are not built to withstand repetition. They collapse under their own weight. There are also slip-ups in language. When someone is juggling two worlds, sometimes names get mixed, places overlap, or a detail meant for one story accidentally spills into another. These small mistakes often come out quickly, followed by rushed corrections, nervous laughter, or a defensive tone to cover the error. But no matter how fast they try to patch the hole, The inconsistency lingers in your memory, a reminder that something doesn't add up. Another sign is the over-explaining. Instead of answering simply, the response comes with too many details, as though trying to convince you through excess words. Ironically, the extra information often creates more inconsistencies. A simple question about where he was can turn into a long-winded explanation with unnecessary specifics that later contradict themselves. The effort to sound believable only makes the story sound less real. Over time, these inconsistencies create an emotional strain. You begin to feel like you're always double-checking, always replaying conversations in your mind, searching for the truth hidden between the lines. The trust that once made you feel secure is replaced by suspicion, not because you want to doubt, but because the details simply don't align. Your intuition senses what the words try to cover. That when stories don't match, there's another reality being lived outside of your sight. Lies cannot survive forever. They may stretch, they may twist, but they always leave behind traces that betray them. And it's not the grand confessions that reveal the truth, it's the subtle slips. The mismatched timelines, the contradictions that keep surfacing, when stories no longer flow seamlessly, when the truth feels rehearsed instead of lived, it's the clearest sign that another presence exists in the shadows, no matter how carefully it's being hidden.